We're actually starting this afternoon with our panel on proactive coastal relocation for community and ecosystem resilience. And I'm joined on the stage by Emma Gildesgame and Kimberly Starbuck and Jessica Szetela. Thank you. So I'll hand over to you guys.
Hi everyone, before we start, I just want to say we're going to have a lot of community engagement going on in this, and so if people want to shift towards the middle so we can see and chat with everyone, that would be absolutely wonderful. But so I'm Jess Szetela, and we're talking about coastal retreat, relocation, and restoration today. And so, before diving in, I want to draw your attention to the photo credits on each of these images throughout the presentation. They're all from the website called MyCoast, which is a website where users can go on and share both data and images of flood happenings across the state and across multiple states in the US. And most of these on the slide deck are from Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and most of them are from within the last year. Now, this being a conference focused on coastal relocation, or coastal resilience, I know that everyone in this room knows about and is concerned about climate change and sea level rise. But I want to take us a step back for a moment just to reorient ourselves to the issue and what is happening to our Massachusetts coast. So we are seeing increased baseline sea levels, increased flooding, and increased frequency and intensity of storms, which can lead to erosion of coastlines, deterioration of coastal structures, the infiltration of drinking water, and even the displacement of residents. Boston has seen 10 inches of sea level rise since the Industrial Revolution, and we're expecting to see 24 to 48 more inches by 2100. This image up here is of Boston in October of last year, where the tide reached 12.1 feet, which is of 2.4 difference than the average for that month. This is Winthrop around this time last year, where the tide was 3.6 feet higher than the average. And this is Barrington, Rhode Island, which was 2.5 feet higher for the average than the month. We are currently seeing 1 inch of sea level rise per every 8 years, but as mentioned, this rate is changing really quickly. By 2030, we're likely to see sea levels up to a foot higher than what they were in 2000. And so, looking at this 2030 data, this map is a projection of how likely a flood is to occur from 0 being dry to 100 being annual flooding being expected to happen. I want us to focus on a few things on this map. First, I want you to kind of focus in on that dark blue annual flooding and remember how that looks. And then I also want to point to this area around Malden that is filled with this light green and orange color. These are the 1% chance of flood or 100-year flood, and then the orange is the 500-year floodplain. And 21% of Massachusetts residential land actually occurs within these two floodplains across the state. And this is especially important to note when we look at the 2070 data. And so looking again at those dark blue areas, you can see how much more area is going to be inundated in 2070. And when we look back at Malden, we see so many of those light greens and oranges turn to blues and purples, meaning that these areas that were expected to flood every 500 years now and in 2030 can be expected to see floods within 5 or fewer years. And this is just a reminder that the ocean is here, it's going to keep coming, and we need to act now proactively. I'll hand it over to Emma.
Thanks, Jess, for that really hopeful picture of our future. All of this data is thanks to our friends at CZM, and you too can go play with this kind of addictingly terrifying and fun interactive map online. But there is a lot that we can and have to do to address these challenges that we are facing now and we are only going to continue facing into the future. And so don't try to read this. I'm going to talk you through it and also tell you how you can find it. This is the flood adaptation hierarchy, which I think of as a toolbox that was put together by some of my colleagues at the Nature Conservancy, and it was published in 2023. And basically, this looks at the full set of ways that we can adapt to sea level rise, to these challenges that we're facing. And You've heard about a lot of these today. We have kind of a spectrum here from the solutions where we are battling nature, where we are hardening our shorelines, where we are cutting ourselves off from nature. And that's where we are. That's kind of the default in a lot of places. And thanks to really hard work from a lot of people in this room, we are shifting that default. But really, the flood adaptation toolbox recognizes that the longest term, most multi-benefit, most sustainable way to protect people from flooding, both on the coast and inland, is by protecting natural buffers. And we are, as a field, doing a pretty good job of recognizing that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution, that these tools need to be used across this spectrum, and that we kind of need to use them in sequence, that the solutions that help you with the flooding that's coming tomorrow, sandbags, some of the smaller deployables, are really important to keep the water out of your basement tomorrow, and they're not going to help in 10, 15 years. We need longer-term solutions, and those longer-term solutions necessarily take longer. And one of the things that we and all of our project team members who are here in the room and many of you have been thinking about is a really big gap in this toolbox. And this gap in this toolbox is eliminating risk by helping people, infrastructure, and all of the features of our built environment move out of harm's way, truly get to a point where we are not fighting water anymore, and where we're getting out of the way and keeping ourselves safer from climate change, and also opening up the opportunity to create new coastal or riparian habitats where they don't currently exist. Taking that really, really crowded waterfront and helping people get out of the way of water and helping make more responsive, dynamic coastal ecosystems. And a lot of times we call this managed retreat. I'll talk about the phrase in a second. I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about it, including me. But it's really about eliminating flood risk. And this can look like direct voluntary buyouts where there's a program that will buy your house and you can sell rather than to another person who will face flood risk, where you can sell to a program that will remove your house and replace it with permanently protected lands. It can look in places where there's structures of really important historic value, or maybe where you have a big lot that's on a hill. You can move a structure physically inland. It can also look like longer-term land use decisions, like rezoning and rolling easements and transfers of development rights, and thinking not just about where people are leaving, but also thinking about where those people are going and how we can equitably and sustainably bring people into a safer future with plenty of safe homes. And as I promised, I have a lot of notes on words. The phrase managed retreat sucks. It just does. Like, if you go up to somebody, nobody wants to be managed, right? Like, you don't want somebody to tell you what you can do with your home. And retreat, we associate, especially in kind of a Western American mindset, retreat is failure. But managed retreat is the phrase that a lot of us in this field use. It's the phrase that policymakers use. So it's a phrase that's important to really define and contextualize, but also get people comfortable with, what does this actually mean? What can managed retreat look like? So this word cloud, I love doing this word cloud. I'm not doing it with you all today because that's not really what we're focusing on, but this is from 47 different people at a conference that Kim and I presented at in Rhode Island about the types of words that people are using. So my takeaway on wording is the phrase managed retreat, it's here. It's the one we're using. Nobody's really come up with a better one. And also think carefully about your context. Think carefully about who you're talking to. I don't think any of you are going to do this, but you never want to go into a community and say, hi, I'm going to manage retreat your house. Are you ready? That's obviously not something that we would do, but also it's not something that you want to do. And so now that we've sort of done this high-level intro, I want you to take your phones out and tell me about what your experience with managed retreat is. So I'll give you guys a second to scan that QR code. I'm also going to switch screens in a second so you can, we can start to see the responses. So,
yeah, and if you're having trouble seeing, you can look on the back there.
Did this work? No, this did not work. Well, in that case, I will report back what I'm seeing. So you guys can still keep scrolling. So the breakdown here is the same breakdown that we see in a lot of times that we ask this question. So we have a lot of folks, the vast majority of people, looks like close to 80% of people in here are either interested in exploring this as a concept or have actually started talking or thinking about this internally in your organizations or externally with partners. There are very, very few of you, about 9% each, who are in the early phases of implementing a project or who have implemented or are in the process of implementing a project. So there are a lot of us thinking about this, and there's also a bunch of us who are starting to actually do this work. And we'll talk about ways that we can learn from each other. But if you are new to this, you are not alone. And if you are doing the really hard work of figuring out what this can look like, you're also not alone. So what is managed retreat, and why is it this huge gap in the toolbox? Well, one, it's really politically charged because governments are rightfully sensitive about the idea of saying, hi, we're gonna buy your land. That's been associated with really egregious displacement, colonization, racism, gentrification, highways cutting through cities. And so the idea of, hi, we're gonna create a program to buy your land is necessarily really sensitive. And it can be really politically charged. It's also expensive. Where is this money coming from to buy houses, buy the property taxes, or buy the properties whose taxes often fund really big parts of your municipal governments, and just take them off the tax rolls? It's expensive now. It's also painful and emotionally charged, right? Home is your safe space. Home is where you celebrate wins and where you recharge after things are hard. Home is where you have family and friends memories. Home is home, right? And moving is terrible. And also all of the inequities that are baked into our housing system, they're also baked into any potential relocation systems. There's a really, really high potential for inequities in terms of who gets to move, who gets what support to move, where are people moving to, and what are the impacts on those receiving communities. And it requires us, as we keep hearing over and over again at this conference, to work across the silos that we all get really comfortable in. So why are we talking about this? Why are we taking 45 minutes of your day to talk about this? Because it's necessary. The ocean is coming, and we are working hard to slow down the pace of climate change, but it's here. And if we're going to keep people safer, and if we're going to create opportunities for coastal restoration, we have to be thinking about this and be thinking about where and how to do this right. Because it's an opportunity to prevent losses. Moving sucks. I hate moving. But losing everything in a flood or having your health and safety and your well-being threatened by floodwaters is worse. It's also an opportunity to reimagine our relationship with our coast. How can we create a coast that is safer, accessible, dynamic, adaptive to climate change, and also potentially help keep our communities safer by creating kind of naturally dynamic and adaptive coasts? So it's an opportunity to really redefine what our coastlines look like. And again, a reminder, I am talking about the coast right now, but this is equally true for inland, and a lot of the best examples of this to date have been for inland flooding around rivers. There we go. Because right now, a lot of this work is happening reactively. There'll be a storm, people will have lost their homes. I think we've all seen the pictures of homes falling into water bodies. And the reactive responses that we currently do reinforce social and structural inequity. Flooding, like all climate threats, is a threat multiplier. If you lose your housing or your house isn't safe, you may lose access to your health care or your doctor if you have to move somewhere far away. You may not be able to get to work, or you may miss enough work while you're trying to recover that you lose your job. Your social networks are so critical to resilience, and so those are place-based often. And so proactive planning, working with communities, can support and reinforce social resilience, financial resilience, community resilience, in addition to the natural ecosystem resilience that we've been talking about. Not to mention that paying for repeated floods is incredibly expensive, so it might be expensive now, but it's less expensive in the long term. Also, managed retreat is a nature-based solution. Getting out of the way of water can make space for the natural dynamic coastlines that we have vanishingly few of along our coasts as we have coastal squeeze between rising seas and increasing development. These, unlike a lot of the hardened infrastructure, they strengthen over time. The weakest that a living shoreline or a salt marsh restoration is the day it's done. It'll keep strengthening over time as those roots tie the sediments together. Built infrastructure, not so much. And it also helps connect people, as we keep talking about, to the shoreline. And so if we get this right, through proactive planning, we can keep people safer on their own terms. We can do a whole bunch of really interesting conversations with communities to develop community-driven solutions to meet those needs, help folks stay in their areas where they can keep all those incredible social support networks. And we can have brand new opportunities to protect and restore these undeveloped coastal lands to resilient, functional coastal ecosystems, which then have their own cascades of benefits. So this is the theory. I'm going to turn it over to Kim to get practical for a little bit.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Starbuck with the Urban Harbors Institute. And I'm going to first talk a little bit about a survey that the Urban Harbors Institute conducted back in 2022. Actually, Kristen Uterwick, right over there, I'm going to embarrass her. She was the one that kind of initiated the survey. And so back in 2022, we sent a survey out to 72 municipalities in Massachusetts. So you can see that map up there. So there are about 72 municipalities along the coastline, and so we asked them to complete the survey. It was fairly short, and basically we were asking communities about their perspectives on managed retreat. So we sent this out to harbor masters, to town officials, to conservation agencies, and we got a number of responses. So 47 of these municipalities responded, and you can see in green, those are the ones that did respond. And what we really wanted to get a sense of was, are people even thinking about this? And also, what projects have been done related to managed retreat that might be examples for other communities that are interested in this? So first off, we did ask them, are you considering managed retreat? Now, in retrospect, we realized the word consider might have been like a little bit confusing, and people might not have known exactly what we were saying. But basically, we wanted to know, are you even thinking about it? Is that something you're considering in your community? So 17 or more responded that they are considering managed retreat. 15 said that they were not considering it. And then 9, we had some conflicting responses. So we might have received 2 responses from a municipality. One person said, yes, we are, and the other said, no, we're not. So maybe that kind of demonstrates the confusion over the consider. That said, we were surprised that really more people were considering managed retreat rather than not considering it. All right, and so this is just a very brief overview of the findings. We do have a long report that is written up on this, and I'll, in a minute, give you the QR code so you can find it and dive right in. But some of the findings are, we looked at the barriers to managed retreat, and then what are the benefits to it. So the barriers included a lack of relocation sites. Also, just general concern over the public response. Obviously, as Emma said, these are homes that people have had for a long time that are right along the coast, and communities are concerned about how people would feel about moving their homes. There's obviously been a lot of pushback in communities, and understandably, these are homes that have been in their families for generations, so it's a really sensitive topic. There also was concern about the cost of purchasing land to potentially move these houses. And generally, just a concern over funding. That's always an issue. How are we going to fund this? How are we going to potentially, give people money to be able to move their house somewhere else, or actually demolish it at times? which the word demolish sounds really terrible, but some of the benefits to managed retreat included reduced flooding and reduced maintenance. So some of these homes are getting flooded over and over and over again, so reducing that flooding. Also just general infrastructure in the community being flooded over and over. Enhanced natural resources, so as Emma said, some of the land that is then, if something is being moved, that land is often converted to open space or wetlands or salt marshes that then could be used as additional protection for that community. And then generally less of a need for emergency response when these storms or this flooding comes through. We had a number of recommendations that came out of this report. Here you can see the cover of the report, and then that is the QR code if you want to just jump right in and start looking at it. Some recommendations included one being needing funding assistance. So really there was need for funding for purchasing property, for moving or removing infrastructure, relocating people. And while there are funding sources, municipalities don't necessarily always have the capacity to then apply for that funding. There also was a need for just general, accurate information for the public. Outreach and education really is a top priority in this, and we want to make sure we're giving people the right information about what might be coming. Obviously, we don't always know the full extent of climate change. We can estimate and predict, but we don't know what's coming. So trying to give them as accurate a picture of what might be happening in the future and giving them then that timing horizon. Equity is a big thing that was, not really identified in the survey very often, and it is a big concern in communities. So a lot of vulnerable populations are actually in danger of being flooded, and really looking at equity and retreat is really, really important, and understanding the impact that might have on these vulnerable communities, which maybe they then can't move out of harm's way. And then planning horizons, so really a recommendation would be to look at the horizons as to should we be planning for 2030, 2070. Communities are really ready to implement significant retreat projects right now due to practical, legal, and emotional challenges. We did hear some communities say that they don't have a place to then relocate that infrastructure. And a lot of people will say, well, if in 2030 my house is going to flood, I don't want to move it now, which, again, is understandable. So that's just an overview of the survey that we conducted. Again, more information on our website, or you can ask questions later. I also just briefly wanted to talk about a really cool example of what a community or a state actually is doing regarding retreat. So generally, we are not the first state that is looking at retreat, and we won't be the last. This is something that is happening around the country, around the world, and there are a number of examples of this. So we should look to these examples to think about what we might want to do in Massachusetts. I actually hadn't heard about this until we were kind of diving into our presentation, so reading up on it was really, really interesting. So really, New Jersey is the only state in the country that has their own buyout program. So it's a voluntary buyout program. It was established in 2013. And so homeowners could actually go to the state and say, I would like to, basically, I am thinking about moving my home. I am right along the coast. I am dealing with flooding. I am interested in this. So it is a voluntary thing that the homeowners are doing. And in the process, since 2013, 1,100 homes were moved throughout 20 municipalities and 10 counties. So they have been bought out. Again, these homes were demolished, which that word I feel like is just terrible, but I can't think of another word. And then that area was turned into open space. So you can see the pictures up here of a home being flooded, and then the during process of the demolishing, and then the after process of creating open space that then could be used as some sort of a barrier or protection from flooding. So really, it relocates these New Jersey families whose homes are subject to repeated flooding and acquires the property to use as natural flood storage. And generally, this program also really understands the emotional and financial toll that this might take on communities, on the homeowners. And they do assign a caseworker to every single home that is being moved to talk through with them about the issues of, grief over losing their home, talk about what this program might look like, talk about, just all of those different emotions that come with potentially moving their home. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. It is really hard to read, so I apologize for that. But this is generally the buyout process where, so the state of New Jersey ends up applying to really get federal funding for this program. And then homeowners will go to the state, to really DEP, and say, I am interested in this. Or it's possible that the homeowner might be approached by the state and say, we realize what's happening. Would you apply for this? So the homeowner applies. And at some point, they figure out if the grant was then accepted. And then there becomes the part that is the buyout implementation. So they go in, they buy out this house. The homeowner gets a certain amount of money for the buyout, and then the house is demolished. And then there's the site restoration part. Again, the caseworkers assigned to this. People then end up going and moving somewhere else or buying land somewhere else, and that is the whole process. And a number of people have actually really said that this has been a great process for them. Obviously, there's always that element of grief that's associated with it, but it's possible that this house was dealing with flooding for, a long time, and people are putting a lot of money into it. All right, and just to finish up my portion, I want to just talk about a grant that we received about 6, 7, 8 months ago from the Office of Coastal Zone Management, and so thank you to CZM for that. And this is a project that we are working on. We have a couple other project team members here, Melissa and Andrew, and then Emma and Jen are working on this project. And so this whole project then is looking at, the word managed retreat is, something that a lot of people don't really like. So we're trying to find new words for that. And so we've been saying proactive coastal relocation. It's kind of a mouthful. But this grant is called Proactive Planning for Collaborative, Equitable Retreat and Relocation in Massachusetts. And so there are 3 different parts to this grant, and it's all of our work is underway right now, and we are on Zoom calls like 20 times a week together. But the first part is the peer learning network. So this is already underway. It's looking to increase the number of Massachusetts environmental professionals with information, tools, and relationships to then take action to be able to incorporate relocation as a tool in their community. Another thing we are doing is we are actually having a conference on this, or a workshop. It is going to be taking place on June 3rd at Mass Audubon, the Boston Nature Center, so a really cool location. And we're going to be talking all about relocation. We're going to be doing some trainings. We do have a network, which we are going to have a little QR code up here in a little bit. We have a network of a lot of people, some people in this room potentially, and it's the Proactive Coastal Relocation Network, and we have calls really once every other month, and that network in particular was invited to this workshop. If you want to become a part of the network, that would be amazing, and there are still some limited number of spaces to be able to attend the workshop. So it'll be one day at Mass Audubon here in Boston. So first thing is building that professional network so that people are prepared to take action. Also, we are developing a knowledge hub. So Andrew here, I'm going to embarrass him, but he has been putting together an amazing hub of information. He's doing a literature review of what people have done in terms of managed retreat, studies that have happened, research, and what data gaps are out there. What do we need to do moving forward? And so that is a big part of the project. And that will be available to everyone once it's finished. And then we are doing community engagement. So really going into communities and talking to them about their perspectives and really trying to amplify the voices and priorities of the people that are experiencing this extreme flooding. Okay, do we want to take questions now? Or I have no idea, I feel like I talked for too long.
So we can take a couple of kind of content questions, and then we actually do have questions for you, because one of our big purposes is We know a lot of things about managed retreat, but I know that there are people in this room who have led projects. I know that one of the biggest things we need is that managed retreat support group, which is what we initially called the Proactive Coastal Relocation Network. So let's take like 1 or 2 questions. What do you guys think? Like we got 10, 12 minutes left. Take a couple questions and then go to ours. Cool, okay.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, Julie.
Sorry, I have to chime in. A, this work is fantastic. B, you know I want to be a part of it. And C, I worked on the Blue Acres program. New Jersey DEP was a client on a past role that I had. We interacted with them, and there's so many things that we should try to kind of tap in. I would even suggest that we try to meet with them. There's a lot of ins and outs, and there's a lot of additional support that DEP is giving to folks. And they're working directly with the municipalities in the sense that it's not just a voluntary program, it's the community really being proactive and getting involved in like pointing out where the parcels are that need to be addressed. So it's kind of a statement, but a question like, can we do this? Can we get them on board and really think about some of the ways that we can overcome those challenges that you had all, talked about, the concerns by the homeowners, the concerns by the municipalities, but also there's some ins and outs about the funding itself, the federal level that I was able to kind of dig up, that we should really think about here in Massachusetts.
So as part of the Resilient Massachusetts Plan, MEMA has committed to undertaking a pretty extensive buyout and elevation study, and I know from some conversations that is on everybody's radar. So that's not going to be within the scope of our project, but that is really important, and we all there's a lot of really, really good things to be learned from relatively similar states in New Jersey and also the program in Vermont. And yes, as you hit the nail on the head, federal funding is a giant question mark and is absolutely essential to being able to support states in doing this work. Okay.
Hi, Alan Kratz, formerly of New Jersey, now of Maine, and happy to be here in the midway between the two states. A comment about words. How about the words moving up? Moving up to better lifestyle, better transportation, better health outcomes, higher ground, moving up. So maybe that's a new concept to talk about.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I've also heard moving to safety.
I was wondering if the issue of fiscal impacts came up in like the survey work and how that factors into some of the community decision making.
Physical impacts, meaning impacts to?
Fiscal, like
Oh,
loss
fiscal.
of property, tax revenue,
Yes.
the cost of restoring the land.
Yes, that
relocating
definitely came up as a big issue, and just a lot of concern in general about funding and how to acquire that funding to be able to address those issues. To try if a homeowner wants to move their house and the community or the state is going to help them, how does the state then get enough money to be able to deal with that? So yes. And Kristen, who led the survey, has some thoughts.
Speak to that sort of from a different aspect. So I think maybe you mentioned the loss of municipal revenue, especially from big fancy houses that are bringing in a lot of property tax that then are no longer in the system. And we've identified that as an issue. And in fact, the former administrator of the town of Hull came and spoke to us about their thoughts because they're actively considering retreat. And I think, quite frankly, he's worried about it. But he did have some examples. For one, he mentioned that when the Plymouth nuclear power plant went offline and the town of Plymouth lost some revenue, the state sort of came in and provided some cushion for them to have some time to figure out how to adapt. And so something like that might work, but it is a big concern,
Looks like there's some good questions on that side. We're making Andrew get his steps in.
Yeah.
Have you considered looking into teaming on a bridge strategy with what I'll call generation homes, the new trend in real estate where somebody says, hey, I'm only going to live for 20 years, so I'm going to buy it for X. That relieves some of the initial financial burden and gets people lined up. or municipalities lined up to then convert the land, so it takes some of the burden, the emotional burden off. It might be, I mean, it's an interesting way because it's the profitable real estate market that's also engaged. Just a thought, if you've considered it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting thought. What we're doing at this point, I cannot emphasize enough, we are not planning a Massachusetts state relocation project. We are gathering input and building connections, but that's exactly the kind of things that we want to hear ideas about. One of my immediate thoughts there is that ties into some of the conservation easement tie-ins of okay, if you commit to sell in 20 years, or there's also programs where a buyout program will buy a property and rent it back to somebody for a certain number of years. My concern is always, I never want more development in a floodplain, even if it's potentially short-term, because people get attached to things and don't want to get rid of them.
I'm sort of interested in whether or not you're working with realtors, because realtors are not required to describe that a piece of property is sitting in a floodplain. So in my little neighborhood, we went through a retreat presentation, which was really terrific. And then 1, 2, 3 houses on those 2 streets went and sold for more than twice what they would have ever gotten in a retreat strategy by taking down the houses. Reality check for you.
We have talked about it. I know of at least one home right now that we have, on a different project, not related to this managed retreat project, have been talking to that homeowner about flooding for many years. I see Connor raising his hand. That we've been working on, and that home is currently for sale for $900,000. I think for right now, we're gonna pivot so that we can ask you all some questions in our remaining 5 minutes. We are all gonna be here, so you can come find us later, and we're gonna give you the code to put our, to join the network. And so Jess and I are gonna go run some Slidos.
Go ahead. You talk. Yeah, cool. So yeah, we have a couple more Slidos for you guys.
Do you want to do resources, or what would it do? Let's do rate.
Do this one? Okay.
Yeah, let's do this one. Okay.
So first there's of course the QR code. Do you have to stop?
Yeah, I have to switch the,
Yeah.
yeah. You talk. I do
1
this.
second. So we're gonna ask you, what would doing managed retreat right look like? So if we were to do this correctly, what sort of benefits would we see? What sorts of things do you guys want to see? So that will be up in 1 second.
I don't think we can actually switch so that we can look at it, but if you guys put things into what would we need to do this right? What would doing it right look like? And then because we can't share the results, I'm gonna read some of the themes. Oh, and you can all see them on your phone.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Slido having the good technology.
Yeah, then you guys don't need me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm seeing stuff like access to nature, healthy ecosystems, public access, lots of stuff coming up on here. Voluntary is a big one. I know we've talked about that a lot. Equitable buyouts. Not seen anything come up multiple times yet, so you guys have a lot of ideas, which is great. Let's see, livability is a good one.
I love that word. I'm also gonna make a pitch for if there's a resource that you really think should exist, or if there's a resource that you know and that you've found helpful. Andrew, can you stand up? This is Andrew. He's our wonderful graduate student, and he is building this database. So if you wish something existed or wish you could find something, if you know of something or something in progress, that's Andrew. Go talk to him.
His database is beautiful, and
It's
so
truly gorgeous.
It looks amazing, and I think it's going to be an amazing resource once it's done.
Yeah. Ooh, fair pricing is showing up real big in here.
Absolutely.
I also trauma-informed and careful listening, and there's some really education on the why. These are all really critical. And I do want to make a big shout out to CREW, which is Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, who are not here today. They are elsewhere. But they are our kind of the partner at the table who is not in this room right now, and they are doing incredible work working with community-based organizations to host visioning sessions in May and June with communities at the front lines of this to really understand from people who are going to have to move or who may have to move what this could look like.
Great. I'm seeing strategic and trauma-informed come up again a couple times. And so I also really liked movement of people from all socioeconomic classes as well.
Minimize heartbreak.
That's a good one.
And so we're going to keep the Slido open. I think you might be able to also access, I'm going to change the settings so that you can access all the Slidos even if we're not having them up. But the other ones, oops, hold on, I can't change the slides if I'm not there. The other questions are about the resources and about the major barriers. So as soon as we get off of this stage, I'm going to change the settings so that you should be able to access all three whenever you want. Tell us things. We will look at this. But one last QR code. Join the Proactive Coastal Relocation Network. If Google Groups is being annoying, it will be annoying. It is usually annoying. Come find me and I can add you directly.
Go back to questions.
Yeah, if anyone else has any more questions, we are happy to take them. And thank you for answering ours.
Yes, we have about 1 minute, so maybe one more question.
Thank you. Just a question on, curious if you heard anybody talking, I know it's already hard enough to get people to the table to talk about, but beyond 2070, it's kind of convenient that we have Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model data to 2070, but if we adapt hard infrastructure, especially today, it's going to have to adapt again in the future. Nobody has a crystal ball, but sea level rise continues to go up beyond 2070. Just curious if you heard, even from other jurisdictions, other states, talking about that.
Hello. I'm looking actually other people in the room here. I see a number of people who have worked with sea level rise specifically, if they know of projections that go past 2070, or maybe Emma does.
There are definitely projections that go past 2070, but I want to pull out two things that I heard. This idea of we're just going to have to keep adapting with a lot of this built infrastructure, and there's places where we're going to have to do that. But the idea of moving people out of the floodplain avoids that, which is why we're talking about it so much. I also, in our last second, want to reiterate 2.5 years ago when I first started having these conversations, it was because a municipality, I was chatting with them in an area that is at like a foot above sea level right now, maybe, floods a lot already, and I asked them if they were thinking about retreat. They said, we can't talk about that, we can't think about that. And that same community, its residents, its municipal staff, its town councilors are coming to us and saying, help. So the conversation is shifting dramatically, and people are starting to get their heads around it. So the more we talk about it, the more comfortable we get talking about it. Remember when we didn't talk about climate change in the definitely past and definitely not future, where we didn't talk about climate change? And we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't solve it when we didn't talk about it. So the more we talk about it, the less reluctant people are to really think about it, with exactly those types of timescale questions of, okay, fine, we can protect this till 2050, then what? Thank you.